Hello everyone and welcome to this presentation. Today I will be discussing cultural representation and cultural transmission in video games. Video games are no longer just a form of entertainment. They can become one of the most influential digital media of our time, shaping how people experience stories, identities, and cultures across the world. Through interactive gameplay, immersive visuals, and global online distribution, games are now powerful cultural platforms. As we see on this screen, gaming is a global activity. Players from different countries and backgrounds engage with digital worlds that often draws inspiration from real-world histories, myths, and traditions. This raises an important question. How do video games represent culture, and what kind of cultural message do they transmit? To explore this question, I will examine a recent news article alongside academic research on cultural impact of video games. The central case study for this trend review is the video game Black Mask Wukong, an action role-playing game developed in China. As shown in the visuals, the game draws heavily on Chinese mythology and traditional aesthetics. It is inspired by Journey to the West, one of the most influential works in Chinese literature, and incorporates mythological characters, ancient landscapes, and symbolic imagery rooted in Chinese culture. This strong visual and narrative connection to traditional culture make Black Mask Wukong an ideal example for examining how video games can function as tools of cultural representation. In a 2024 news published by Reuters, the game is described as generating widespread excitement in China and attracting significant international attention. The news emphasized how Black Mask Wukong is seen as a symbol of cultural confidence. It presents the game as a way for Chinese culture to reach global audience through modern digital media. According to the news, many players and commentators view the game as a breakthrough that demonstrates China's growing cultural influence in the global gaming industry. Overall, the news article frames the cultural impact of games in a largely positive and celebratory way, highlighting national pride and the potential of video games as instruments of cultural soft power. While the news article offers an optimistic view, academic research presents a more complex picture. A systematic literature review by Gerardo Pizarro and colleagues published in Education Science in 2023 examines how video games influence culture across different contexts. The author argues that video games are important cultural artifacts. They can support cultural learning, shape identity, and encourage cross-cultural understanding. Because games are interactive, players do not just observe culture, they actively engage with it. However, the literature also highlights important limitations. Cultural representation in games is often influenced by commercial goals. The researchers therefore stress the importance of critically analyzing video games, rather than assuming that cultural exposure through games is always accurate or meaningful. When we compare the Reuters article with the academic literature review, a clear contrast images, both sources agree that video game has significant power. The media and scholars alike recognize that games such as Black Mask Wukong can bring cultural narratives to global audience. However, the difference lies in how this impact is evaluated. The news articles focus on success, popularities, and cultural pride, presenting cultural transmission as an unquestionable achievement. It does not explore how cultural elements are adapted or potentially transformed for entertainment. In contrast, academic literature adopts a more cautious and critical approach. It asks a deeper question about authentic, depth, and representation. From this perspective, cultural transmission through video games is not automatically positive. It depends on how culture is framed, who controls the narrative, and how players interpret what they see. In conclusion, video games are powerful tools for cultural representation and transmission. They can function as cultural ambassadors, but they can also oversimplify complex traditions. By comparing media narrative with academic research, we gain a more balanced understanding of the cultural impact of video games, rather than viewing cultural representation as pure positive or negative. It should be approached as a complex and dynamic process. As video games continue to grow in global influence, critically engaging with their cultural content becomes increasingly important. That's all. Thank you for your watching.